Part two.
Part two, here we go. We're so cheesy.
How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
What have you been up to?
I have been recording my core conditioning class.
Sure.
Doing my 8-week challenge stuff and PT-ing my girlies in the field.
Might be an idea, actually. Give us an update on that 8-week. So this is a new one, am I right? This is like a 1 weekend, isn't it?
No, it starts on the 8th of June, so I'm just coming to the end of this 8-week challenge where I had 55 ladies participate.
Wow.
And they've had some unbelievable results, because at the beginning I was a bit worried because lockdown happened and I thought,
Sure.
This is going to be really tricky, no one can get to the gym. But you know what, it's absolutely been such a lifeline for them because it's given them structure, it's given them something to focus on, it showed them how to effectively train at home, how to incorporate working out with their kids and their families. And I think we hit just over £350 lost by the whole group last week.
Yeah, I mean, I think you touch on a really good point there, which is what's good about this. So I think when the lockdown hit, and of course everyone thought it was going to be 15 days or 16 days, and it's obviously gone on a long time, but I think a lot of people took the kind of viewpoint, oh my God, this is absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
But what your group are proving is that with a little bit of focus and a little bit of organisation, nothing difficult, they could overcome it.
Definitely.
That is absolutely incredible. So they've all been working out purely at home, I take it?
Yeah, they've been doing 2 home workouts a week, which is a progressive program that I give them. So each week they do either more reps or...
Are they doing wall walks?
No.
Hill sprints like a duck or anything?
Wall sits, but not wall walks. I don't want to kill anyone.
No.
And then I go live with them once a week and we do like a HIIT workout, like something a little bit fun they can get all their kids and stuff involved in as well. And then they maybe do additional stuff like some of my online classes. They all have a step target, which obviously with this weather is ideal for getting the kids out as well. And a couple of them PT with me too now that we're allowed up at the field. But yeah, it's been amazing. And I think a lot of people have seen the structure and the focus that it's given these girls. Yeah. And now that's why they want to be part of the next one, because I think people maybe initially completely hit the button of, I'm on lockdown, I can't go gym, I'll just eat what I want, drink what I want. And now they're feeling a little bit like, I need to start moving in and I need something to focus on and do. But hardly any of them have any kit at home. They don't have barbells, don't have dumbbells. So we've just been doing tempoed workouts and, isometric holds and stuff. And yeah, one girl's lost 31 pounds.
31 pounds in 8 weeks?
31 pounds in 8 weeks. I PT'd her last week. She came down the hill. And I just cried. I was like, oh my God, you look so different.
That's 2.5 stone, isn't it?
Unbelievable.
Wow, we need to get her on.
Unbelievable, yeah.
We need to get her on. If she wants to come on, of course.
Yeah, definitely. And her home life is not the easiest on top of that. And she has a young child.
Let's get her on, yeah.
And she has just excelled expectations.
She could be a real inspiration to the people that we're trying to meet, trying to reach with what we're talking about here.
Yeah,
so if I said to you, what's been good about this with regards to lockdown? So, like one of the things I say to Johnny all the time when he's getting stressed about stuff and something happens, I say, what's good about this? If nothing, what could be good about this? What's been good about lockdown for you?
It's given me the opportunity to really think outside the box in terms of how I can offer people my services when I can't get in the gym, but also, how I can just help people on a larger scale through online stuff.
Sure.
And classes and the live, let me tell you, the lives for the winners page, 3 of the women who watch those lives are doing my 8-week challenge, and I have never met them.
This is starting to sound like we're trying to sell Lean with Leanne 8-week challenge, isn't it? We've got to be very careful here that this doesn't come across, you know what I mean? We don't want sponsors just yet.
But it just shows the power of something like Winners 2000 staff providing people with online free classes. Yes, we're not in the same room. Yes, we're not in the same building, but we've still got a face-to-face contact. We're still turning up every day, showing these people that we care about them, we want to help them. And people have really loved it. And we've had so many lovely messages saying, this is saving my life. And for me personally as well, doing this has been great for my mental health because I love my job and not being able to do it. And it's just given people something to focus on, something to keep them motivated, keep them going. And, it's just shown that we can offer so much more as a gym to people to help more people, because that's what we're all about.
Which is kind of why we're doing this right now.
Exactly.
And just to go back to something you just said, we talked in part 1 about sometimes if we could help people create goals and targets that were of service. And as you say that and you light up and you talk about, it's been amazing to still help people, you've probably enjoyed it in that you've still been able to be of service, which is obviously what you're all about. That lady losing £31, absolutely incredible.
Unreal.
Yeah, when you think about what we talked about last time in part 1 about excuses, reasons people couldn't do things, you know, she's obviously been through a very difficult situation, still made incredible gains.
Yeah,
we're gonna get her on. How did we do in part 1 then? So I've seen a little bit of part 1. How did we do? Did we talk too much fluff? You always talk fluff. You're a fluff girl.
I think we talked more about, like you said, the mindset of people that are at the start of their journey and how you can find excuses and you struggle with accountability. I think all that is really important, and that is part of why the diet lifestyle or the diet business model that is out there that everyone jumps on, it doesn't address any of that stuff. It just, here's the plan, do it, you lose weight. Whereas we are really getting into the meaty part of, you know, the mindset and how to build better daily habits that will make these changes sustainable, which is the key. It's about sustainability, not losing 7 pounds in 7 days and then putting it all back on again. So
I hope what we did in part 1 was kind of set the table. I don't think either of us thought it would go as long as it did, because you talk too much, quite clearly.
Yeah, I talk too much.
You talk way too much. So I don't think either of us thought that would go on for as long as it did, and that's why we've decided to break this into parts. And what we've decided we're going to do today is kind of dial in some meat and potatoes, literally. And we're going to try and focus on, explain to people a little bit about how you would choose the amount of calories that you're going to start on, and what type of macronutrient split. We're going to maybe pull out some of kind of the common diets, ketosis, what was Atkins, if it fits your macros, paleo, intermittent fasting. And we're going to maybe have a discussion about the difference between correlation and causation. So where people say this diet worked for me, maybe it was actually one aspect of the diet that worked for me, not necessarily the diet. We're going to talk about biochemical individuality, which is how I do it, e.g. everyone's different. People are always going to require different fuel mixtures based on something called genotype and phenotype, this type of stuff. We're going to try and cover that.
Cool.
And then you'll probably be tired by then because you probably had another whippy. So then we'll come back to part 3. I think we also should remember what we said at the start of episode 1, which was what's our purpose? Well, our purpose was to reach people that were struggling. I said it was really important that we showed empathy. We were relatable, particularly for me, who can say things that are sometimes a bit blasé, a bit aggressive. I have to make sure that we are responsible in what we say, and that we understand some of these people can be vulnerable.
Definitely.
So we've got a little bit careful. Question number 1.
Here we go.
Boom. Why do people gain weight? Why do you think people gain weight?
Well, the fundamental fact is they're eating too much.
Sure.
Too many calories.
That sounds a bit one-dimensional. Keep going.
Yeah, but 9 times out of 10, it's because they are unhappy in some aspect of their life, if not all of it.
When you say that, if you think about obviously the number of women you're working with now, obviously not just women, but you're working predominantly with females at the moment. Do you think then that what they're eating is actually a consequence of them not feeling too good?
100%. So for me, one of the biggest things I've learned through doing my 8-week challenge program is people don't struggle with necessarily the structure of eating well. They struggle with how they react when something bad happens in their life, or when their plans don't go the way they want to. Or if they're really hormonal is another thing. It's a massive trigger for a lot of the women I work with. So if something goes bad, what do? They try and get comfort somewhere, and that comfort tends to be eat. And then once they eat 1 biscuit, they eat 2, they eat 3, they've eaten the whole pack, and it just derails from there. And I totally relate to that because that's what I used to do as well. And I think a lot of people turn to food because, let's face it, crap food does taste nice. It's nice, isn't it? You know, we don't get fat because we don't like food.
Or carrots.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Broccoli,
So I think the minute of pleasure you get out of it is just taking the pain away from something else that's going on in your life. Actually, what really happens is you then get into this cycle of pleasure, pain, and it just makes it worse. But I think essentially people get overweight because they are unhappy and they are turning to food for some sort of comfort.
Okay, let's keep going. Why else do people gain weight?
Lack of education on how to eat right, calorie deficit, how to train effectively. People will start something and maybe not see results because they aren't on the right path. Like you said, everyone's different. So
Should
then
we just
they will
stack
quit.
up with that where you said about lack of education? Should we stack with that? maybe social media stroke media.
Yes.
Maybe kind of selling things that
Yeah.
just never going to work.
Yeah.
They just want to make a fast buck. So
Yeah.
we call that, say, lack
100%.
of education. Yeah.
And quick fix. Like
Yeah.
I've had a lot of people struggle with the fact that they're only losing £1 a week, £2
Right.
a week, which to me is phenomenal,
Great,
because I know that's going to stay off.
Sure.
And I know that the training I'm getting them to do, the weight loss doesn't necessarily reflect what's actually going on, because we're, you know, stimulating the lean muscle tissue, etc. But if they're not losing £7 in a week, I don't want to do it. And
Yeah.
it's something I've really got to say, look, you need to slow down. Like if you lose £7 in a week, that's not a good thing.
No,
that's slowing down your
definitely not a good
metabolism.
thing, yeah.
And we're actually going to end up in a place where you're going to either need to starve or train 4 hours a
Well,
day
your
to
hair and
lose
your teeth are
weight.
going to fall out. Yeah.
Yeah, so people want a quick fix. People struggle with, you know, day-to-day life normally is stressful. Everyone's in a rush. Everyone's got targets to meet. They got kids to feed. They got bills to pay. And people struggle with their mental health and how to cope with stress and anxiety, and they do that through food.
Sure.
It's also very social, isn't it, food nowadays? Everyone...
You're talking to an antisocial hermit.
I know,
so I wouldn't
but
really know much about
everyone
being social.
socially, let's go out for a meal. It's my birthday, let's go out for a meal. Let's get a takeaway.
Don't
Let's
people
have a
go
barbecue.
for a workout for the birthday? Like,
My friends don't.
I haven't got any
My friends want the porn star martinis down at Las Iguanas.
Oh my God. Let's keep going with this about why people gain weight. So one of the things that stands out as you were talking is you're talking about people being very organised and saying, you know, they're all very busy and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think one of the reasons people gain weight is a little bit of lack of education. If I said to you, do people gain weight because they're lazy? What side of the coin would you come down on? Yes, they're lazy, or no, they're not lazy, it's something else.
I think there's always going to be a portion of the population that are just lazy. They are.
Why are they lazy?
Well, because they're demotivated. They don't really know what they want in life. They're
Nail
unfocused.
Nail on the head.
Yeah.
So is that person fundamentally lazy? Or are
No, they just don't have any drive, do they? They don't have any leverage to make action.
Why don't they have any drive? Because they're a bit foggy?
Yeah.
And maybe they're sleepwalking?
They don't have any clarity on what it is they really want.
This was the first point that I wanted to pull out today in this why people gain weight. So in part one, we talked about some people might say to themselves, I am fat, it's my genes, whatever it was. And that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
Okay? The other thing that I hate is when somebody says, she's just lazy. He's just lazy. Having worked with athletes and sports teams for a long, long time now, and sometimes when you meet a group of, say, 25 footballers, and people will tell you, this one's lazy, this one's a problem, this one's whatever. In my experience, none of them are those things, and they're definitely not preset that way. I think that sometimes, whether the behaviour is laziness, whether it is aggressiveness in a team sports setting, whether it is anxiety, I think predominantly that's all the same thing. They're not really focused on what they want.
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
no real strong purpose. And to use your words, once there's no purpose and no leverage, I was having a discussion with a young man yesterday who's actually related to Iron Mike. I'm very interested sort of in, in a career in maybe personal training and stuff. So we were talking about toughness and where does toughness come from? How do you get toughness? And I explained to him that really toughness actually is a byproduct of having a really strong purpose. When you have an incredibly strong purpose, you will push through things. For example, if your purpose was to try and provide outdoor workouts for your members during a time of when the gyms aren't available.
Careful.
And you were to encounter some barriers with local councils, then your toughness might make you pick the phone up, phone your solicitor and deal with it.
Yeah.
The toughness comes from the purpose. One thing I'd like to say to people that maybe watch this and that are overweight and either call themselves lazy or have other people tell them lazy, I don't believe anybody is fundamentally lazy.
Yeah.
I think the majority of people are what I call sleepwalkers. They've never had the opportunity, the resources, the support network that helped them clear their fog. And therefore their choices just become kind of like malaise. They just have this routine of check my social media at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Wake up with a food hangover because last night I ate 500 grams of carbs between 8 o'clock and 11 o'clock. Check Facebook, check Instagram, eat a piece of toast and some coffee, feel like absolute shit. Get to lunchtime, starve myself through lunch with a sandwich. Get home,
Meal deal.
Cook something really quick. Get the kids to bed. I'm absolutely exhausted. Let's binge. Let's go again. And I think they get stuck in that cycle.
Yeah, definitely.
So if someone was to say to me, why do people gain weight, I would say essentially, I think they're probably missing the top layer, which is, let's see if we can give them a really strong set of goals, really strong purpose about something. What I always aim for then is that the reasons they choose food become a consequence of their focus.
Yeah.
I had a friend who ran a chain of powerhouse gyms in America, and he ran a very successful weight management club. And he said that people essentially got to a point where they chose food for cost, convenience, and taste.
Yeah.
And he said they were 3 terrible reasons to choose food. And if you think about those examples, cost, convenience, and taste, well, we're just seeing a national chain open up its drive-thrus again. We're closed down because we have a disease that's caused a lot of problems for people that are obese, but we're opening up drive-thrus. So get too political about it. But that's a prime example of something that probably tastes really nice. It's ultra convenient. I can actually drive through and get in my car.
It's not convenient at Plymouth. It's an hour and a half to queue.
Right.
They're literally queuing around my house.
Why would you know?
Because it's right on my roundabout, and the police, this is how sad it is, the police have to warden the traffic between 5 and 8 p.m. because the queue for KFC is that long. It's up the motorway. You
haven't been going in for McFlurries or nothing, then?
No, I don't like that.
You want the Biscoff?
Biscoff
and the Whippy. So I think cost, convenience, and taste, and certainly in my experience, because over 20 years doing this, that tends to be what happens.
Yeah.
I also think alongside that there is the huge misinformation. You can watch a television advert about a breakfast cereal that might have a glycemic index rating that is through the roof. It's loaded with wheat, it's loaded 100%. With refined sugar, things that I would never have a client eat in a million years. We might come on to that today if we get time. So they're starting their day jacked up with this massive insulin spike followed by the massive, and yet it's being portrayed as it's full of fiber and full of sustained energy. Complete bullshit. But that's probably something that maybe the government could look at addressing. The misinformation in social media and in television adverts.
Definitely. And that is something that I try and do on my social media and in my programs is I make like these videos where I will buy from the shop like certain brands, I better not say, of like breakfast bar or a specific diet club chocolate bar or all these health products that are marketed as diet foods that you should eat instead of a Snickers. Right. And then I'll put next to it like a load of like crap food that you shouldn't eat. And like there's more calories in that than there is that. And there's more sugar in that than that. Like
100%.
Unfortunately, we're fighting a losing battle when it comes to stuff like that because the whole marketing process.
We ain't losing nothing. We're not going to lose nothing.
No, but you know what I mean? Like unless people educate themselves and like we're trying to do with this video and this podcast, then you're going to walk in a supermarket and fill your trolley with a ton of food that is labelled as healthy and good for you and cost 3 times the amount of actual real healthy food. And actually it's not. It's full of chemicals, crap, and you look on the back, you can't even pronounce half of the ingredients. So
the sugar, alcohol,
it is important to educate people on.
So the reason I wanted to ask you this question first before we dived in a little bit is, again, to make people understand that they're not born fat, okay? They've not got a fat gene. Currently, the habits, the routines, the strategies they have don't serve them.
Yeah.
We talked last time about their identities, etc. I think that people sometimes feel like they're lazy or they get called lazy. I don't believe that. I don't believe anyone's lazy. I just believe they probably aren't quite as motivated as they could be. And maybe working with one of our guys is the best thing that Thatch does for somebody is makes them feel a bit more motivated.
Yeah, definitely.
So they take more action.
And learn how to set proper goals as well, because that can often be an issue. Like if a goal is too specific, I want to lose weight. Yeah. Okay, well, it's going to be tricky to really attach a real driving force on that. Like, why do you want to lose weight? Who's going to benefit? How much weight do you want to lose? Or realistically, let's transfer those into smaller goals, like on a daily, weekly basis to implement better daily habits.
I'm old enough to remember going on management courses when I was running a finance team back in 96, 95, whatever it was.
I was only 10 then, by the way.
Thanks for that. Yeah, it was a terrible job. I hated every second of it. Now I get to wear a hat every day. But I remember going on these training courses for managers where they taught you about the smarts.
Smart goals.
Oh my God. I mean, I cringe now. Look back at what we'd have to do this with our staff. I had 4 in my team, and I'd have to do a smart goal setting with one of them. I'm like, oh my God, I cringe when I look back at it now.
I think specific is good, though. Specific goals are good.
Sure, but we don't want to get into that today because that's more fluff. Maybe that's part 3. But anyone can talk about a specific goal until you define the reason, the purpose, and then you stack up the leverage Waste of time. So I think maybe what we're agreeing on is that people perhaps gain weight because they maybe lack some clear goals.
Yeah.
There's some misinformation. Yeah. And then they haven't ever been given the right strategy.
Yes, definitely.
And hopefully we can sort of, in this very next section, we can kind of dive into that. Cool?
Yes.
How are we going to calculate how many kcals a lady that comes on to Lean with Leanne is going to use? Let's have a discussion about how we would recommend that people started to actually work their calories out.
So I have one of two methods. I sometimes do use a macro calculator online, but a good one. Or I will actually get them to write a food diary and basically try and gauge roughly where they're at the moment, because whether they're eating crap or sort of healthy-ish food but are still in a calorie surplus, their body is obviously metabolizing a certain amount of calories. So I will try and figure out from their food diary roughly what they're on. If the food diary looks like it's a lot of refined sugar food and crap, I will say, right, let's just stick roughly with the amount of calories you are on, but let's change it for some wholesome food. Let's, give you a protein target to hit.
Yep.
And then we'll introduce some workouts which have compound movements in to make you burn more calories, activate more muscles, and we'll see what happens from there.
Sure.
And then kind of change and adapt depending on what their weight does on the scales. That's
100%.
Yeah.
Very simple. Okay, so here's how I do it now.
Yeah.
How I've pretty much always done it. And this is where I want to come across and say, this is going to sound blasé. Okay. So I'm not ever particularly worried about the exact calorie amounts.
Yeah.
My focus is always on quality. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I believe that there's more damage being done by Pop-Tarts and cereals.
Yeah.
And in my head, I'm thinking, I want to make this as easy as I possibly can. When I meet somebody and I'm making an assessment about how many kcals to start with, it is as simple and as broad as this. What's their current weight? And then I'm going to give them between 12 and 18 kcals per pound.
Yeah.
Well, how does somebody get 12 and somebody get 18? If somebody is slightly more well-muscled and slightly more athletic, I'm going to shift the number up a little bit.
Yeah.
Okay. If they're not, I'm going to shift the number down. Now, the slight addition to that would be to go back to what we spoke about in part one. If someone's got a completely crashed metabolic rate, if they've been on the 1,000 calorie or the shake diet, then I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, where's going to be my safe number here? And I'm explaining to them, look, you're probably going to gain a little bit of weight. We just have to get the wheels turning again. Bear with me. You need this. So essentially, I might say, if you're 200 pounds, you're someone that does some activity and you've got a little bit of muscle mass, I might times that by 15. There's kind of where we're going to start with. Okay. At that point, the most essential thing to me is then that they journal. Okay. Yeah. I have to get them to buy into this. You have to journal what you eat at what time. And more important to me is, how do you feel 30 minutes after the meal? Yeah. Because what I'm looking at is the impact of that fuel mixture by meaning the carbs, the fats and the proteins all combined. Yeah. How does it make them feel? What I want is good energy, good mindset, feeling really focused. Yeah. What I don't want, and what, for an example, if someone had had Pop-Tarts for breakfast, 30 minutes after, they're probably hungry, jittery, tired. Yeah? Bit wired. Yeah. That's how they feel. If someone has scrambled eggs on wholemeal toast, we can get into the bread thing, which is not what I'd recommend, but we can get into that. Scrambled eggs on wholemeal toast with some blueberries. Yeah. My guess is half an hour later, they might feel really good. Yeah. What I'm trying to do in that first 14 to 21 days period of journaling is get them to make an association between, I ate something good, I felt really good, had a good morning at work, took the kids swimming, that was really good. Because I want them to make that link, that food is a fuel for me that allows me to perform at my best. Definitely. Fuel is not about me fitting into a size 10 or whatever it is. So if someone was to say to me, well, what's the science behind it? I would say it's always a bit of a guesstimate. Yeah. And experience tells me that range between about 12 and 18 kcals, that's just what I do it. Now, if I did that and all of a sudden the guy dropped 6 pounds in the first week, then I've made a mistake. Yeah. Okay, vastly underestimated what he needs. Similarly, if someone gains 4 pounds in the first week, wow, I've got that wrong. Provided they are charting what they're eating, charting their reactions, and we've got 2 or 3 measurements set up like we talked about in part one with scales, calipers, pictures, etc., then I think we're pretty safe. Do you think that gives people an idea of how easy it is to work out the starting point? Is there anything else we need to add on that?
No, I think it's a good way. The journaling or tracking or however it is definitely essential because, I think if people aren't too comfortable with you, then they're probably not going to really be 100% honest if they've fallen off the bandwagon or whatever. So tracking and, what you measure, you manage.
Yep.
And
that would be the big takeaway I'd like people to take away from that sort of 2 or 3 minute section is, how do you feel after the food?
Yeah.
Okay? If you're starving hungry and you're screaming at your husband after breakfast, something wasn't right.
Yeah.
Okay, the mixture wasn't right. Now we're going to come on to the next topic will be macronutrients and what macronutrient split is right for people. Well, that's actually going to be something in biochemical individuality we're going to talk about, where everyone's slightly different.
Yeah.
But you can generalize a little bit. We're going to talk about some macro splits that we think might work for most people. But I'd just like to make that clear to people that try and make a connection between the meal that you've eaten and how you feel between about 30 and 60 minutes after. You should feel really good.
Yeah, not like you need a nap.
Not like you need a nap after a whippy and Biscoff or whatever it is. Not like that. Or not like very commonly. So having worked in an office, like I'm saying, in between about 93 and 96 or whatever it was, something like that. So after lunch in offices, people were literally face down on their desks because they'd been eating bread. Or pasta.
Donuts.
Pasta was a big thing in the 90s that people would eat, and they wonder why they got this massive crash. I might come on to that in the next point. Okay, so that's how...
Would you get a client to... Say that you had a client and you gave them their calorie target and you were asking them to journal how they felt, etc.
Yep.
If their diet had previously been really terrible and was all processed foods,
it's a great question.
Would you give them advice on... what sort of structure of food do you want them to eat in terms of protein and carbs and fats?
This is a great question, because what you're going to allow me to do is to uncover the number one rule I have when I work with somebody on weight loss or body composition. I want their internal language to be, I can do this.
Yeah.
So I have occasionally told people to eat a packet of biscuits for dinner. And do you know why?
I've never been told that on my diet.
Do you know why?
Yeah.
Because previously he was eating 2 packets of biscuits and 6 packets of Monster Munch.
Yeah.
And if I said to him, I want you to eat steak and veg, he would say, I can't do this.
Yeah.
This guy is an alien. My life's just not like that. Yeah. So I call that my A to Z step approach. So sometimes with people that have had really long-term problems and mentally were just in a terrible place, I would literally get them to write down what they were eating.
Yeah.
Packets of wagon wheels, some of that, I don't know if you might get the same. Some of the things that people used to eat, I used to be literally amazed by.
I know,
all day buffet Indians, and then Chinese takeaway at 1 a.m, I'd be like, what?
Yeah.
What is going on?
I know.
But I remember having this conversation with a guy, and I could tell he'd been referred to the gym. He didn't really want to be there. This is probably about 10 years ago now. He didn't really want to be around me. He was massive. He was huge, probably 30 stone. He didn't want to, he wasn't at that point yet.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is not going to go well if I try and get him to eat steak and veg. So I just literally took a step back and I thought, when he leaves the gym today, he's going to say, that wasn't too bad. I can do this.
Yeah.
So, for example, he had an evening meal, and then after his evening meal, which is very stereotypical, he'd just go mad.
Yeah.
Just go mad. 6 cans of Coke, 2 packets of biscuits, 6 packets of Monster Munch.
Sounds like my husband.
So I remember saying to him, well, what do you want to eat for tea? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, what about just 1 packet of biscuits? He looked at me like I was a lunatic. I said, well, just try it.
Yeah.
Now, of course, I'm not suggesting people eat biscuits.
Do not eat biscuits.
Do not eat biscuits. What actually happens in my A to Z sometimes when people are in that bad a place, very commonly, for example, for breakfast, they're not eating anything. A lot of people don't eat breakfast. So I would start by saying, could you eat 5 blueberries?
Yeah.
And they would say, well, that's not going to make a difference. So just eat 5. Just eat 5. So we build up a habit.
Drip feed it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the 5 would become 10, would become 20, would become a boiled egg, would become et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
The power of making daily habits.
Yeah. We're on the same page here. So I think that would be something I'd really stress, is that if people have got this very negative self-talk, well, this ain't going to work for me, this guy's an alien, it's all right for him, he just, he wants to live like a monk, then sometimes, just my outcome is walk out from this appointment with me saying, no one bad, I can do this.
Yeah, I reckon I could do that, yeah. And also, in my experience, if you change everything, nothing works. Do you know what I mean? If you ask someone who has spent a long period of time in a habitual cycle of poor eating, binge eating, not exercising, whatever, if I then say to them, you're not going to eat carbs for the next 3 weeks and you're going to train 5 times a week. It ain't going to happen.
Nope.
So,
realistic.
you got to chip away at the stone, slow and steady, until they start doing these things without even realising, and it becomes part of their daily life. And
yeah, you've probably seen some as well that were all in from day one.
Yeah.
So there are people sometimes that you meet that are completely reverse of what we're talking about, where normally they've had a trigger event. Maybe they've got separated in their relationship, they've lost a job, something has triggered, I've got to change, and they literally turn up and say, I'll be at the gym twice a day, I'll drink shakes, I'll do whatever. They're quite rare in my experience. The only other thing I think we should cover on the kcals, and this is going back to my point about me not sounding blasé, is that by the journaling and the measurement, we can then make changes.
Yeah.
It's not like we just guess a number.
Yeah.
I guesstimate the number based on my experiences. And because I've done this with so many people, I can look at maybe, he's pretty well muscled. He's going to need a bit. He's an ex-rugby player who's just been drinking too much. He's going to need a bit more.
Definitely.
But it is very much about let's measure what's happening.
Yeah.
And then let's move on from there.
That's definitely a disclaimer that I have to give my girls, because I think for women especially, there is a very big emotional attachment to body weight and the number on the scales. And I have to, sort of give them a disclaimer of, look, I'm going to give you this amount of calories and I'm not guaranteeing you that it's going to work for the first week. In fact, if you're coming to me after 10 years of yo-yo dieting, it probably isn't going to work on the first week because we need to rebuild a little bit first. But please know that in the long run, in the long term, this is going to serve you. And in 6 months, when you're able to, occasionally go out for a meal or have a glass of wine and still get results, you're going to be thanking me. So this is about, let's try it. If it works, we stick with it. If it doesn't, we'll change it. But the only way we're going to know how to effectively make those changes is if we journal and we track and we know what we're doing, because we can measure it, we can manage it, we can change it.
I want to add one final thing to the discussion on calories, which is is that I don't ever want to create barriers for people. And I have had people and worked with people who just said, I'm not counting my calories.
Yeah.
Do I still think you can get long-term, safe, sustainable changes? Yes. If you're saying to me, listen, I've got 2 children, I just can't be asked to weigh food, I'm not going to do that, then it's very simple. We used to do this thing where we'd say, want a piece of protein the size of the palm of your hand, etc. Fill your plate with as many green vegetables as you want. So if you're listening to this thinking, I'm not ever going to weigh my food, that's absolutely fine. I don't weigh my food. I've been doing it so long, I know exactly what I need.
But that's the key point, isn't it? And that's what I say to my clients. Like, I know that in the first couple of weeks, it's an absolute ball ache to weigh your food. I mean, I do it all the time, but it's just second nature to me to just get the scales out and weigh my oats or whatever. It doesn't bother me. It's just part of my daily life. But after a period of doing that, you're going to know exactly what 20 grams of oats is, exactly what 100 grams of chicken looks like, and you're not going to need the scales. So maybe just commit to it for a couple of weeks to gauge it. If you're someone who's never done it before and you haven't got a clue, just to gauge what you're doing. And then, at the end of this 8 weeks, 2 weeks, whatever, you're going to probably know what you're doing.
I think that's great advice. I think that's great advice. But psychology, we talk about 21 days to form a habit. Yeah. So maybe we could just encourage people, maybe it would be better to do it. But if you're saying to me, Simon, I'm not weighing my food, can I still get results? Yes, you can, because I'm a great believer, and we're going to come on to this when we talk about food choices. I'm actually more interested in getting good foods in and bad foods out. Yeah. And the way that the body will respond to that, in terms of how the hormones regulate, better sleep, etc. Yeah. And actually probably end up losing fat anyway. Yeah. Okay. So there's our discussion on kcals. Yes. I hope we've been responsible with that.
I think so.
Should we shift on to macros?
Yes.
And what we're going to do within macros is I think I'm going to geek off a bit.
Here we go. Prepare yourself. Buckle up, kids.
I might geek off with this. I said to myself when I was trying to prepare for this whilst I was dealing with bureaucrats.
Careful, Simon.
Careful. Yeah, I'm being caught again. I said to myself, I want to keep this in layman's terms. So I'm going to keep this next bit. What's your feeling on macronutrient splits? Sorry, I should go back a step. Macronutrient just simply means a protein, a carb, a fat. So the type of fuel source. So
I typically do a split for all my clients. I start them with 40% protein, 40% carbs and 20% fats. Now, the majority of people that come to me don't eat and haven't eaten for a long time fat because they've all been on low fat diet club-esque plans.
Very typical, yeah.
And when they come to me, obviously their hormones are all over the place because as we know, fats are essential for the production of hormones. And I myself spent 10 years on a low fat diet. and I didn't know anything about fats and how important they were, but I would go 40% protein, 40% carbs, 20% fat. And then later on down the line, I can usually gauge if somebody gets on with carbohydrates or not. If someone's feeding back to me that, look, I still feel really lethargic, a bit bloated, I'm going to then think, okay, maybe I'm going to increase your fat content and decrease your carb content if you're okay with that. And usually that settles it down. But because, like you said, different people experience different things. But I always like to have 40% protein because it's essential for recovery after workouts. It's got a higher thermic effect than the other two macronutrients.
Explain what that means. Make sure we cover all the bases
So
here.
basically,
it uses more calories.
Yeah. So you burn more calories to digest protein than you do carbohydrates and fats.
We've got to make sure we explain things on this.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's all right.
And it's great for controlling your hunger hormones, so it makes you feel fuller for longer, as they like to say. And it's just, it's like the building blocks of lean muscle tissue, which are essential for sustainable weight loss.
Yep.
40%. And I usually say to my girls, look, your carbs and your fats are never gonna be exact, okay? It's not, don't stress about that. My priority is that you hit your calories and you hit your protein target, and the rest will fall into place. And I'll make adjustments if I need to from there.
That sounds like very good advice to me. So what would my advice to be to people about the macronutrient splits? Very, very, very similar. And a couple of things I want to pull out from what you've said. Typically, people that have consistently tried to lose weight haven't eaten enough fat.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you're under your good fats, once you don't have enough good fat, you are in trouble. Okay. There's important processes in the body that will not happen because you do not have enough fat.
Yeah.
And cholesterol, which can't make your sex hormones, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so fat is mega, mega, mega essential. Not KFC, but quality fats.
In fact, if you remember when I had my blood test, my really in-depth blood test, I was coming off the back of 10 years on a low-fat diet, and he said to me that he'd never had a testosterone level so low in a female, and that was why, because I was just not... I was lifting heavy, so I was trying to promote these hormones, but because I didn't have fat in my diet,
you didn't have the precursors to make the hormones.
Yeah.
Plus, there's a concept which we call cortisol shunt pregnenolone steal, where the body is actually in a kind of, this is a bit geeky. You can check this out on the internet. Cortisol shunt pregnenolone steal, where the body actually starts to shunt and make more cortisol because we've kind of learnt this process of functioning in this like excess cortisol kind of wired state. So we actually miss it out. What you typically find is people are wired when they're like that, so they feel quite productive, like they've just been drinking caffeine, and then within about 6 months they have a massive crash. So the first thing I would say is that typically people that have done a lot of different things for weight loss have not eaten enough fat. They've typically, we don't want to generalize, but typically they've had so much sugar. Yeah. They're in all sorts of a mess. Yeah. And the way they react to sugars are a complete joke. They're just all over the shop. So that's very typical. So I think a very sensible starting point for somebody would be to say 40% protein, 40% carbs, 20% fats, or 40% protein, 30% fat, 30% carbs. And I would generally make a bit of a kind of call on that based on what I saw in front of me. There's not a great difference. Yeah. There's not a great difference. And then I would probably adjust that based on the reactions on the food journal. Yeah. And this is where it might get a bit geeky because we're actually going to move into some different diet types. What might be good about those things and what might be bad about those things. Then we're going to talk about what are good foods and what aren't. And I'm going to blow everyone's mind on that as well. So I think on macronutrient splits, the way we should summarize it is to say that that's a good starting point. Yeah. But it's not definitive. Okay. No. And the concept of biochemical individuality, which is what I believe in, is that everyone is totally different. And that your genetics will predispose you to working better off a particular fuel mixture. Yep. Then a combination of your genetics and how you've lived your life will determine what specific foods you're actually going to do well with and what foods you might need to avoid for a period because you have a sensitivity to it. Yep. And the sensitivity actually affects your digestion of everything else. I want to try and cover that in the next section. So that's we cover that macros all right? Yes, I think so. Yeah. And we've explained everything properly. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about particular diets then. Okay. Keto. So I should explain. Ketosis basically is a concept where you don't eat sugars, you jack up on a huge amount of fat, and your body just learns to kind of do everything it needs to from fat and protein. Ketosis is normally where you eat about 70% fat, 30% protein. Most people, think it's more protein and less fat. Have you had any experience of keto? Any thoughts on keto? Any clients on keto?
So after I had my blood test, excuse me, I did the keto diet. I did a complete 4 weeks, completely strict, to the point where I was having to use those urine strips to check that I was in ketosis.
Yeah.
Which,
that's fun, isn't it?
If I remember rightly, basically you're changing your body's system so that you use fat as an energy source instead of carbs.
Pretty much, yeah.
So I did that for 4 weeks straight, just to kind of reset my system so that I could start producing testosterone to gain lean muscle tissue for sustainable loss. And then we started introducing carbohydrates back in.
Yeah. How did you feel on keto?
I actually was okay.
Sure.
I felt fine. I thought I was going to be really fatigued. I thought I was going to really struggle to teach my classes and train. I thought I was going to lose strength, which did not happen once.
No. So we're going to sound like keto fans, aren't we, by the time we finish?
I know, yeah.
We better be careful, we better be careful.
I was fine for a period of time. I don't think I could sustain that because I do actually really like carbs, but... Yeah,
so here's what I would tell people about keto. So if someone says to me, do you recommend keto? You're probably going to get my bog standard answer, which is, it depends.
Yeah.
Okay? I do not recommend keto for a large proportion of people. Yeah. There are some, however, for whom I think it will have massive benefits.
Yeah.
The people I think it works best for are the people that genetically, like me, run very well on protein and fat.
Yeah.
If you're from England and you have our typical heritage, you tend to find that we do run far, far better on the fat of the land.
Yeah.
We do run pretty efficiently on higher fats, higher proteins. And again, everyone is different, so let's not generalize. But what that means is that when we go into, or we try and eat in ketosis, we probably feel okay.
Yeah.
There's another really great thing about keto. You don't eat a lot of sugar, which is the killer for the guy that sits at home and eats the 3 packets of biscuits at night, okay?
And it's proper strict as well, isn't it? If you
if you
really
do it properly.
Fully going
there's
into
some really good coaches actually who teach you, because getting into ketosis is not as easy as people think.
Yeah.
You'd have to be really high fat, and where in my experience a lot of people go wrong is they eat more protein because they're conditioned to I don't eat so much fat. You actually have to go big.
Also, it's important to say that, I have had a few people come to me saying, I did keto and I didn't lose weight, and then they'll give me their diet plan. And I'm like, you're eating pork scratchings and cheese, it's going out of fashion. Like someone said, eat as much fat as you want.
Absolutely.
Like fat is the macronutrients that has the most calories. Okay, so if you then just completely go, I can eat as much fat as I want. If you're in a calorie surplus, you're not going to lose weight. Okay, it's just a fact, whether you're on keto or not.
I had a friend do keto, and his breakfast was bacon, eggs, and Diet Coke. Because he said, well, it says it says I can have fizzy drinks. So he was just nailing Diet Coke. So I was thinking, this is not going to end well. And
I do like a Pepsi.
Of course, it doesn't end well. So the other thing that keto, and we could talk about carnivore diet, which is just eat meat. The other good thing that keto often does is if people have sensitivities to wheat, which in my experience 95% of the population do, even if they don't want to admit it. If people have sensitivities to dairy, to refined sugars, and these are normally the things that get flagged on an OLCAT test or a Viome test, then when they're eating keto, they're not eating those things, so they feel better. A lot of people with autoimmune diseases tend to do really well on keto. My guess is over the next 10 to 20 years, a lot of the research that the top people are doing, Dr. Rhonda Patrick, Dr. Peter Attia, whose links on that I'll put on the show notes, that they're all sort of getting closer and closer to the fact that they think keto might have some significant benefits for people with, say, epilepsy.
PCOS.
Now, I'm not prepared to say that. I'm definitely not prepared to say that. My hunch is, if you ask me about my mortgage on it, I think within the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to find that eating that way might, for those populations, be a really positive way of doing it.
I guess taking the sugar out of the diet as well,
100%.
which acts as a stimulant.
100%.
Like if you are someone with epilepsy, not that I'm a brain surgeon, but
no.
The least stimulants you have in your body, the better, I say.
This is my point about causation or correlation.
Yeah.
When we carry out research at university, a lot of times people, for example, some people might say, I did single leg curls 3 times a week and my squat went up.
Yeah.
So a real idiot writes, well, single leg curls makes your squat bigger.
Yeah.
What it didn't tell you is that the guy was also deadlifting, squatting, box jumping 5 times a week, and his squat went up. So when we see positive reactions from things like the keto diet, I always say to people, causation, correlation, you know, so is it that's done it, or is it just kind of a factor or a part of it just happened by chance?
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to say that keto is great or that keto is terrible. I think that the jury is still very much out. Is there some really compelling evidence that keto works very well for certain populations? Yes, there is, by people far smarter than me, and I'm definitely not going to go against their word. Have I done keto? And I thought I should add this. I've done keto. When I first started studying metabolic typing back in 2001, and I was really, really into it, and I was really interested in sort of the concepts, and I went through a period of about 6 to 9 months with ketosis. When I rode my 628, I was 10 days in to the shift. So I went to a rowing at the place called the Mountbatten Centre in Portsmouth, because we had a gym member in Torquay who was a real gobby prick. He was a rower, and he was really full of himself. He kept saying that rowers were the fittest athletes. Okay, which I said, no, they're not. You know, my belief is always, I'm of the belief, mixed martial artists, boxers, rugby league, American football, people that have got to absorb punishment. That's a different.
Queens. Yeah,
that's a different thing. Okay, different thing than, you know, rowing is painful and all that stuff. So back in those days, I was a bit more cocky than I am now.
Is that possible?
You'd say that. So I actually jumped on the row machine. His best time was a 6:39. I actually got on there, and then I was on shift and did a 6:37 and said, no problem. He said, oh, you need to prove it. Okay, so I said, fine, I'll go to the next regatta, which was in Portsmouth. I was 10 days into ketosis. Okay, so I wasn't quite into it. And I remember getting to the car park, and I didn't feel particularly good. I don't know if you experienced that, but actually when you make the shift, I think the first 14, 21 days are pretty rough.
Yeah.
I didn't feel good at all. And I remember a really dry mouth, and I couldn't get up. I was just so lethargic. And I remember getting into the race, and I was on the front row, and you've got all your boats up there, and I was next to like a British junior champion, and they were trying to psych me out and saying things to me, and I just felt terrible. I remember my tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth, and I couldn't get it off. Such a dry mouth. But I still did 6:28, which I've never done since. Did a 6:40 yesterday morning, so I'm not far off of my age. About 3 weeks later, I pulled a 237k deadlift. Completely natural, never touched a steroid in my life, never will, don't use medical drugs, no wraps, no sleeves, no nothing. So when I look back on some of my best performance, I was about 6% body fat. It's the only time I've ever pressed 60k dumbbells, and I was actually in keto.
Yeah.
Now, I don't actually recommend keto for performance at all.
Yeah.
But if you want my honest opinion of experience it, I actually felt really good. Do I think that's because keto is the best diet? No, I don't. I think vegetables are an absolute essential component, the number one component of diets. I think the reason I got good gains from keto, and the reason that a lot of people might get initially some short-term gains, is that I was definitely eating more good fats.
Yeah.
It meant that I literally had zero irritants, which I later was to discover that I was mega sensitive to.
Yeah.
You know, wheats and all these bits and pieces. So it meant that I'd removed everything that was causing me any sort of sensitivity. I'd upped my really good fats.
Yeah.
I was very consistent, and so I actually got really good gains off keto. I also think it suits my genetics.
I guess essentially you had pushed your body to perform at optimum, like digestion, energy balance, everything.
Yeah,
so
and
it all clicked into place.
I did it religiously. So I just want to make that clear, is that I would always say to people, I'm not sure about keto for performance, but I don't want to be a hypocrite. Those performances weren't things I was targeting. I was just trying to learn about keto and nutrition and metabolic typing. But it did work really well for me.
Yeah.
After about 9 months, 2 of my teeth cracked. And I remember thinking, something not right here. And of course, if you actually study ketosis, there's a theory about your body leaching calcium from your teeth and your bones.
Okay.
Don't know if that's true or not. Again, I'm not expert enough to say if that is the case. And there are people that say, well, if you supplement with calcium, etc., etc. It's all to do with the acid and the alkaline balance in your system. Definitely not prepared to say if that. But I had 2 fill-ins in the space of about a week and thought I might come off keto.
So in terms of weight loss, if you had a client, what would jump out at you to say to someone, I want you to try keto? Like, what would the criteria for someone to try it
Probably
be?
Somebody that really, really was struggling with discipline. Because the one thing you can do with keto is you can sometimes make the meals quite appealing.
Yeah.
They can be quite easy and can be quite bacon and eggs for breakfast. It sounds really appealing, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I'm talking about good quality meats and good quality fishes and dairy and all that stuff. I also think there are people who have been so jacked up on sugar that you've just got to get them off it. And if they want to go cold turkey, and the cold turkey coming off sugar is horrendous.
Yeah.
People are literally hate everything and everybody on the planet.
It's like
Sugar is. I always remember doing a Paul Check course in 2003 or 4 at the Eastbourne Tennis Centre. And I always remember the lady making this really strong, bold claim that sugar was the biggest killer in the world.
Yeah.
And I was there with Gudge and James Richards. I remember us all looking at each other being like, is she for real? And as the course sort of went on, I thought about it more and more. And when I spoke to her about it, she said, anyone can stop at a petrol station and buy infinite amounts of sugar. It's so readily available.
Yeah.
And she said, over the next sort of 20 years, you're going to see more obesity, more heart disease. And sometimes I think back to that, and it was probably a bit over the top, but I think she wasn't far wrong.
No, I know, yeah.
She wasn't far wrong that sugar's doing a lot more damage. So that's one of the great advantages of keto.
Yeah, and would you still obviously get them to journal to see how they
100%.
feel and make sure that they're eating
In 20 years,
calorie?
I don't think I've ever given anyone keto. I don't think. You know, somebody will call me out probably and send me and say, do you want me to eat keto?
I obviously only did it off the back of
some professional
blood
advice
test,
of a really intelligent guy who had your blood work and was able to decipher what the blood work meant.
Yes.
Yeah, we should state that.
Yes.
The carnivore diet, you've heard about the carnivore diet?
I'm guessing it's meat.
It's all meat. It's all meat. We won't waste much time on this one. Am I a fan of the carnivore diet? No, I'm not. Would I recommend it for people? No, I wouldn't. Causation, correlation.
Yeah.
What happens when people just eat meat? They're not eating sugar. They're not eating wheat.
Yeah.
When you test people for food sensitivities, the number one thing that will flag will be wheat.
Yeah.
The number 2 thing will be yeast. The number 3 thing will be dairy. When you eat carnivore, you take them all out.
Yeah.
People often on the carnivore diet say I had an autoimmune condition, I was celiac, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And then they eat carnivore and they say, I feel amazing. Joe Rogan has just done carnivore.
Oh, really?
Okay, yeah, Joe Rogan.
I
I think he did about 6 or 9 weeks of carnivore and lost a lot of body fat.
But I mean, essentially, is that not because he's taking 2 food groups out of his diet? So his calorie
100%.
amount is going to be reduced.
Well, think of this. I've often said this to people. How much steak can you eat versus how many packets of biscuits can you eat?
Yeah.
So I reckon I could eat 60 ounces of steak. I might be sick, but I think I love steak so much I could do that. So when you start to take out all these other very calorie-dense foods, okay, rather than nutrient-dense, then you probably find there's a huge adjustment in actual the number of kcals they're taking in.
Yeah, definitely.
Do I recommend carnivore? No. Am I happy to be overruled if some people like Peter Attia and Dr. Rhonda Patrick, who are the 2 people that I follow most closely, Dr. Dom D'Agostino, I'll put all of these names in the show notes, happy to be overruled if things change and research changes. Not a fan of it. One of my core beliefs is that vegetables are an absolute essential.
Yeah.
If you look at the way that, say, male testosterone is declining in the 21st century, what we call secondary hypergonadism, it's often to do with lack of fibre in the diet and liver issues, which are generally from too much sugar and other bits and pieces. So I'm a great proponent of eating vegetables, hence I'm not a big fan of carnivore. Paleo. Go on, you talk about paleo, we'll have a drink.
So essentially, it's also known as the caveman diet. Again, it's almost similar to keto, but not quite as strict.
Yeah, the cleanup phase is pretty strict.
It's basically, the idea behind it is that you do like a 21-day or 2-week paleo cleanse type thing, where you have proteins and fats to kind of stimulate your metabolism and your hormone system and stuff. And then we normally would ask someone to do a metabolic typing questionnaire to find out what type their metabolism is, and then based on that result we would then recommend which carbohydrates to introduce back into their diet. But it is very effective. It does obviously lead to weight loss because we're taking the carbs out of the diet. But it's basically hitting the reset button on hormones and just trying to build like a position to be in a better place to get sustainable weight loss by introducing carbs slowly back into the diet. Yeah,
so why do I think paleo has had quite a good rap? Because I think it actually suits a lot of people, particularly in this country. I don't think it's going to suit a lot of people in India. Okay, I'm going to talk about biochemical individuality in a minute and my beliefs that you're not going to feed an Eskimo like you're going to feed someone who's grown up around rice. But I think paleo does a number of things. So the cleanup phase, which they recommend, which is 14 to 21 days, and you're not really eating too many carbs other than some berries and bits and pieces, that again is removing a lot of the calorie dense wheats, sugars.
Yeah.
Okay. So even though, we might say, well, one diet doesn't fit all, it's ticking a lot of boxes. It's also increasing fats. So again, if people have been on highly restrictive diets, they've normally been mega high sugar, mega low calorie, mega low fat.
Yeah.
Hormones are absolutely through the floor. So I think it's also doing that. It's also teaching about the importance of protein. I think the way the book is constructed is very good, and that if people actually read it and follow it, it actually gives you stages.
Yeah.
So I don't ever subscribe to one diet for everyone. Never. Don't believe in that concept.
Yeah.
Do I think the paleo has some really solid principles? And then you've got what's primal, which is very, very similar. Mark Sisson, I believe his name is. So they're kind of doing similar things where they're encouraging good food choices and a sensible balance. And I think when you complete paleo, they're sort of advising you to rebuild your carbs to a level where you feel safe.
Yeah.
Feel safe. So do I think paleo has some really good concepts? Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Causation or correlation? Correlation. It's not for everyone. Won't work for some people.
Yeah.
There are people, let's talk about Amy again, who we talked about last. When Amy dieted for, was it the Galaxy?
Yeah.
One of her shows, she was dieted on about 65% carbs. Okay? Amy needs that many. If I'd have put Amy on the paleo for her show, she'd have been a mess.
Yeah.
She would have gained weight. Doesn't suit her.
Yeah.
She needed someone like Dean. Dean typically used to do, or Fuge. I remember when we were dieting Fuge years ago. Fuge dieted on very, very high carbs. So again, if everyone did paleo, it wouldn't work for everyone. But I do think there are a number of principles that I really, really like, and it encourages good food choices. I always think people encourage too many nuts. I never put nuts in people's diet because
again, it's tricky that essentially what we're saying is these diets can benefit other people as long as you know and you've got clear instructions on what you're doing. Because again, with paleo, I remember when I did it, it had just become pretty famous in the CrossFit world.
Oh God!
And
I
remember
tell story in a minute.
It was, I remember being told, just as long as it's protein and fats, eat what you want because you're training at CrossFit 3 times a week, so you're invincible basically. Yeah. And everyone was eating bags and bags of almonds and hazelnuts and stuff to get them through because they're so knackered. Yeah,
I definitely would not recommend a low carbohydrate diet if you compete in CrossFit.
Yeah.
I would not recommend that. I mean, that sport by its very nature and desire is all about lactic acid and anaerobic tolerance, a bit like mixed martial arts. And I definitely would not. And I actually had someone that was competing, working very hard at CrossFit, should we say, and was in a mess, came to see me from following the paleo because the training intensity was through the roof.
Yeah.
They're getting up on caffeine to get through the workouts. Yeah. They're in a massive calorie deficit. They're definitely not getting the glycogen they need. And they were in a mess. So I'm not a big fan of that sort of generalization. I remember that very clearly. When there was that sort of do CrossFit, eat paleo. It's not, in my opinion anyway, not a good combo. It's definitely not what I'd recommend for someone who's competing in CrossFit.
Definitely. We'll move on from CrossFit because I know you get triggered.
I love CrossFit. I might even go do it. Me and Luke were talking about go doing it.
You've changed your tune.
I love training CrossFit athletes. I loved seeing Luke on the podiums and stuff. That was great. I loved it when Ashwin won his thing out in Doha. I remember training Ashwin for CrossFit, and Ashwin is a great friend of mine, but Ash is a bit, too knife short, I think. And I
not to offend anyone.
I remember Ash sending me a text one day saying, because Ash and Amy are the only two people I've ever trained where they were strong enough. And perhaps when we get onto performance, I'll talk about strength as a holy grail and how if people aren't strong enough, you should always try and increase absolute strength, because the absolute strength then carries over into strength, endurance, etc. But Ash and Amy were two people that were strong enough. Yeah. So we could work on maybe their longer repetition stuff. Ash had a problem in terms of CrossFit with the fact that he's so powerful, his fiber types, he didn't have any metabolic flexibility. So one of the things that I made Ash do was empty stomach cardio, because I wanted him to become, have a better aerobic base. Yeah. I remember his feedback from, didn't really enjoy the program. I didn't have any energy to give my missus a portion. That was the feedback, and I was like, "At least he's being really clear about things."
It's been a dry spell in our house thanks to my gym program.
So anyway, let's get off Ash. Let's get off Ash. But let's get on to the one I hate the most. If it fits your macros.
If it fits your macros.
I hate it, and I bet people use it, and it works for them, and I bet people get shredded. Yeah. I want to be really clear about why I don't like it. First of all, so a friend of mine who I was at university with. Is a strength and conditioning coach for a ladies basketball team. I want to use this as an example over in Boston, a great friend of mine. And a lot of the girls, that's 18, 19, okay, and they were starting to use If It Fits Your Macros. I think the biscuit is called a Tim Tam. Does that sound right? So my friend would say to me, look at what they eat. And what they'd worked out was they could eat so many of these Tim Tams to get their carbs, get a piece of cheese for their fat, and then they would just have a protein shake. Oh, wow. And this was forming this sort of thing was forming a large part of their diet.
Yeah.
And they were 18 or 19. Now, I bet there are people that have such good digestive systems, such good genetics, complete outliers, that can go on Instagram with an 8-pack, deadlift 250, jump out of the gym, and they can survive on If It Fits Your Macros for a while. Yeah. Until they get a little bit older. But I don't think for the majority of the people that we would work with, having a diet that was based on Tim Tams and cheese and shakes is a particularly long-term successful strategy.
No, especially for health, let alone 100%. Anything else. Yeah. I think, one thing, if we learn anything from this whole situation that's going on with COVID and lockdown, is that we all as a nation need to start thinking about the foods we put into our body and how it serves our immune system and how it serves our health. So, if it fits your macros, I guess if you're okay with food, if you can gauge it as a fuel and its properties and the hormonal system and what it does for you in terms of your training and your mood and your day-to-day life, then maybe it might work because it might allow you to have a few treats here and there. Sure. And if that keeps you from binge eating or falling off the wagon, then great. If you're someone who comes from a background that you love food and you love eating crap and then it's an absolute free-for-all to eat pizza. And I used to follow this guy on Instagram who was massive on If It Fits Your Macros. Huge guy. Probably roided up anyway. And pizza every single day. And he'd be like, if it fits your macros, bro. And I'm just like, what are you telling people? You're telling people they 100%. Can eat Domino's. Like, what is it doing for their health? Like, I think we're getting back to the concept of a little bit of knowledge. Yeah. So, for example, when I talk about food sensitivity testing, and tests like the VIO microbiome and the AllCat 500, what that really highlights is that I'm going to sit here in a minute and tell people to eat salmon. On my last AllCat test, salmon got popped. Salmon came up as an inflammatory food for me. Salmon came up as something I had to avoid. Cucumber, okay? Avocado, one of my superfoods. Yeah. I've fixed people, it came up, got flagged, got popped. So as much as we can say to people, these are the foods we'd recommend, somebody can go on Instagram and say, eat a pizza, you're going to be fine with it. Yeah. Well, that's loaded with wheat, loaded with dairy, loads with a number of the things that I think people will struggle with. Yeah. So I'm not a fan of that. If it works for people, great. If they're happy with it. Yeah, I just don't think from a mentality point of view when it comes to food, it serves too great. It's got its place. Don't get me wrong. I do say to my girls, because I know most of them come from a binge eating background or a comfy eating background, everything in moderation, like we can work it in if you need it. If it's going to stop you from eating 3 packs of biscuits, we can do that. But you need to be eating wholesome foods, not just for you, but for your kids as well. So yeah, and this goes back to something that we were talking about off camera, which was I'm always going to come down the side of if you're eating good things, I'm not going to be overly worried about how many kcals. I'd rather you just eat good things and then you learn to adjust them rather than you survived on absolute crap. Are there any other diets that I've missed out? Keto, paleo? I'm going to touch on the famous diet clubs. Ooh. I'm not going to name names because they're am I going to end up getting emails again and spending hours dealing with solicitors and stuff? No. Don't do that to me again. I'm just going to say... your weak bladder has caused me no end of trouble. I'm not going to comment. I'm just going to say, as somebody who I joined my first, we used to call it Fat Club. Everyone used to call it Fat Club. I joined my first Fat Club when I was 16 years old. By the way, how is that even allowed? I do not know. And I was still there when I started working here and I was 25. So I had been, 9 years. And they work on counting points or counting red days, green days, Is the red and green proteins and carbs, is that right? No, it's just a day. Oh, right. So basically, the one club counts points, which AKA is just another way of counting calories, by the way, but the wrong way. The other one used to do red days and green days. So and how people got results on this, I don't know, but red days... What result did they get? Well, weight loss. Short term. Yeah, short term. And then stop coming to the slimming club, put on even more because their set point had reduced
And when they return to eating that number of calories, they gain more weight.
Yeah.
So as a business model, it actually has legs. Sell you something, make you feel like you got a result, and then come back and buy it again.
And like on red days, you'd be allowed to eat as much potato as you wanted, as much pasta as you wanted.
Oh my God.
And then green days you weren't. So it was almost like a 5-2 diet type, restrict for a certain amount of time and then eat what you want for another certain time. And then now there's one that counts sins, which I've got a humongous issue with labelling food as a sin, because what it does for your mentality is
or a reward.
Ridiculous.
We shouldn't have rewards for SIDS,
and basically, whatever these diets are, they're low fat for starters. And if you go into a supermarket and you pick up one of these Diet Club's products and you look on the back, it is 0 fat and a ridiculous amount of sugar and chemicals. And I remember I used to live off their yogurts, their chocolate bars, and their ready meals.
Oh my
okay,
God.
I remember I used to get this one Diet Club chili, beef chili with wedges, and I used to have that every night. And then when I joined here and I started getting educated on food, I went back and I looked on the back and it wasn't even beef. No. Okay, the food that was in there was just disgusting. But my point is, these fat clubs, diet clubs, whatever you want to call them, all I got left with was still having zero education on how to actually get results, an absolutely piss poor relationship with food, because I just built a complete guilt complex over anything that was labelled as a sin or that was over 4 points, and a huge mental health problem regarding the number on the scales, because I was basically living for the day that I would go into this club of women and stand on the scales and have somebody tell me if I'd done well in life or not, because I'd put on a pound or lost or gained a pound or whatever. And basically it just completely ruined me and my body image, and through no lack of, I just wasn't taught anything about food. I was just told, these are the points, this is your goal weight. If you don't reach your goal weight, you've got to stay here for the rest of your life. And every time you get on the scales, we're all going to judge you and look at you based on if it's gone up or gone down. And
this sounds a bit scarring, Leanne.
I know, it was a little bit. But my point is, like,
bad for you.
It's a calorie controlled diet which can be done in such a better way, and my opinion on it is that the mentality of the group, I'm all for communities of people trying to lose weight, and in fact that's what I've worked really hard to build, but there's a lack of education. You don't get taught anything about the food you eat. They try and sell you at the meetings the crap food that they sell. There's nothing about macronutrients, nothing about health, nothing about how you're actually losing weight. And I just definitely don't recommend them at all.
Yeah, I was just going to say, should I check my phone now for the how many emails have I got now from lawyers, solicitors, etc.? I'm in more shit.
I know how I get the women who've been doing them for years, and I know
it's painful
that when they get on the scales and they don't lose weight, it ruins their whole week. They'll cry and cry, and they'll be depressed, and they'll be anxious, and they're so attached to this number, because they've never been told, actually you're on your period, so you could gain up to 6 pounds of hormonal water retention, or actually maybe the carbs aren't working for you, so you've got a lot of food in your digestive tract and we need to change that. Like, all those things you don't get taught and you make an emotional connection with, it's just way more detrimental than it is positive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I would say is, if people are happy and if people are getting great results, then it's not for us to tell them what to do. Do I agree with the concept of slimming clubs? No, I don't, for all the reasons that you mentioned. I think there's a much better way of doing it. Say, having done this for 20 years now, I would say the two biggest things that we've encountered are people that have come from slimming clubs and metabolic rates are just through the floor. And then over the last 5 years, there's been the 1,000-calorie diet. Yeah. We've probably had a lot of people join who say, I tried the 1,000-calorie diet and it really worked for me. And you're like, oh my God, but now I've just gained twice as much of it. Well, of course you've gained twice as much weight. So I think, I'll let you deal with the legals on that one.
Yeah,
cool.
Sorry.
That's all right. That's what I'm used to it, bureaucrats. There's one other thing I want to talk about is intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Because I am a great believer in intermittent fasting, but I do want to make sure I'm responsible in how I explain it. There is a growing body of research from people far more expert than me that is showing some significant benefits from intermittent fasting. What is intermittent fasting? It's what it says. It's a period of not eating, essentially. So there's various ways you can do it. People can fast for a day, people can fast for a period. The most simple way of doing it, how I do it, how a lot of my clients do it, is have a 16-hour window where you don't eat, followed by an 8-hour feeding window. You still consume exactly the same number of macronutrients of kcals. So if my kcals were 3,400, I'm still going to eat those. I'm just going to eat at 12, 2, 4, 6, 8. Okay, as opposed to spreading out. So it's not calorie restriction. One of the reasons I don't put people on IF initially is they've normally been starving themselves, calorie restricted. So I would much rather get them onto like a 7, 11, 3, 7 type plan, get some consistency, lower down all their stress hormones. What do I think is really good about intermittent fasting? There's a number of things I like about it. A convenience factor means I can just work, keep going, get loads more done. I've got to stop and eat.
Yeah.
There are a number of listed benefits in the research. For example, things like maybe a slight increase in growth hormone. I want to come back to that. I'm not sure if that's quite as much. A lot of the research done on mice. So, how you extrapolate it out is never, apples to apples. There are, I think, a number of benefits in terms of gut health. Yeah. And I think that's where I really like IF, is that simple principle of having the gut has a period of just a break.
Yeah.
I think that can be really, really good for people. You do find in fasting that your stress hormones can be slightly elevated. Adrenaline, epinephrine, cortisol, examples of those. And that's why for some people, if they have mental health issues, if they have problems, initially IF is not a particularly good choice. I never use it to start with people that want to lose weight, because I think it's almost teaching them starvation again.
Yeah.
And normally people that come to you have already tried starvation in all sorts of ways. But I would really encourage people to look at intermittent fasting, not primarily for weight loss, actually for health. I think over the next 10 to 20 years, I think that the biggest sort of developments will come in intermittent fasting for health developments as an anti-aging tool, which of course I'm now getting very, very interested in, and in longevity. And I think keto, going back to the growth hormone, so this is one of the things when you start to talk about fasting as being, it's going to increase my growth hormone. The first thing I'd say is I'm not sure it increases it very significantly.
Yeah.
I think maybe in mice it does. I'm not sure it does in humans. I'm happy to be proved wrong either way on that. The other thing I would say about increasing your growth hormone is that when you actually study people that have lived a long time, there's a number of things that happen which are quite interesting, which are almost an offset of optimum performance. You tend to find people have much lower growth hormone that live a very long age. You tend to find more, some heart issues with people that are extremely cardiovascular fit, which would almost suggest that if you're really pushing yourself at age 70, maybe that becomes a bit of a risk factor. Yeah. Okay. So people often say intermittent fasting is great for anti-aging because it spikes growth hormone. Well, I'm not sure it does, or significantly, maybe a little bit. And then the second thing is, if you talk to experts in anti-aging, which I do, about 10, 15 years ago, there was a book called The Life Plan by, I think his name was Thomas, it's Dr. Life or something. He's on the front cover, he's got no hair, he's got an 8-pack, he's shredded to pieces, he's on his boat. And he'd basically written a book about use synthetic testosterone and growth hormone to take your levels back to where you were when you were much younger, and that was the key to anti-aging. That was sort of a very much 1 + 1 = 2 type approach. Okay. But some of the people now who are studying longevity and living later in life are actually of the belief that slightly lower growth hormones actually might allow you to live longer. So I just wanted to make sure we touched on that IF, one of the things people will talk about is you get a growth hormone spike. Do I think it happens? Maybe a little bit. Yeah. Is it significant? No, I don't think that's the primary benefit of intermittent fasting. I think the primary benefit of intermittent fasting is it's very good for your gut. Yep. You meet so many people who have terrible inflammation in their gut, and the inflammation will mess up everything else, digestion, hormones, all sorts. So if I can ever adopt a strategy that helps me have a better gut health, I think it'll have a significant impact on other things.
I also like it because after working with someone for a few weeks, I kind of get a gauge on their eating habits a little bit more. And, if you have somebody who struggles in the evening maybe, which seems to be a typical thing with the women I work with and was for me, I try and shorten the window that they're allowed to eat their calories. Say they're on 1,800 calories. if they get up in the morning and they're just eating breakfast because I've told them to eat breakfast and they're blowing 300-400 calories on that, then come the time they're sat down on their own, they're lonely, or they, aren't feeling great, then they're way more likely to go to the cupboard and eat, over their calories, which is going to obviously have a knock-on effect to their results. So I would then suggest, okay, well, if you're not too bothered by breakfast, and if you feel like you could cope without it energy-wise, let's push your calories back so that you have your first meal at midday. Because, typically for mums, they're very busy in the morning. 100%. They don't have time to get breakfast or whatever. So really, if their energy levels are okay, let's push your calories back. Start at 12. Then you're going to find that actually at 6 o'clock, you've still got 500-600 calories to play with. You'll stay within your calorie allowance, and you're less likely to binge eat in the evening. And when lockdown happened, that's exactly what I did for myself. I thought, I'm quite productive in the morning. I've got a to-do list. I've got to do this, and this, plan out my day. I train. I don't like to train on a full stomach because it just repeats on me, and I just don't agree with it, like digestive-wise. So I wait until midday. I do my planning, my training, then I eat, and I've got a longer period of time there with more calories, so I can have more food. You touch on a real
common point, which is that people tend to consume a lot of calories late at night when you're watching junk TV, and that becomes like an anchor to them as part of the switch-off process to get them to sleep. Physiologically, eating close to sleep is a very bad idea, particularly in high amounts of sugar close to bedtime. So I reckon before we wrap part 2, because we've probably gassed on for a lot longer than we should have done, you talking too much. Right.
You let me talk today. Well done. Proud of you. Proud of you.
Nobody will watch this episode of you talking.
Everyone will watch this episode.
Get 3 or 4 letters from solicitors about slimming clubs, probably.
Yeah, probably.
Because I ain't got enough to deal with.
I didn't name them, so.
Cool. Yeah, I think we're fine with that. The last thing I want to touch on is, what are good foods?
Yeah.
What are the good foods? What should people be eating?
Definitely.
And I want to give some people some generic examples, so they've got some information, and then I want to completely crush all that and tell them why it could be complete bullshit.
Yeah.
What are we going to tell people to eat?
Wow.
Good food choices.
Good, wholesome foods.
Like what?
Like
define it.
Lean proteins, your chicken.
Can't I go and eat a 32-ounce steak in a minute?
Yeah.
That's what I feel like.
Not processed foods. I try to stay away from as much processed food as possible. I mean, essentially, with every meal, fruit, vegetables, like the superfoods, like you say, kale, spinach, avocados, healthy fats. Okay,
so let's do this. Let's go back and forth, and let's name maybe our top 10 superfoods. Okay. Then maybe let's say this is an idea of what you might be eating if you were working with us.
Yeah.
And remember, biochemical individuality. I believe everyone is different. I don't subscribe to any diet. I believe that if you're an Eskimo, you're probably going to do well eating a lot of protein and fat.
Yep.
And if you're born in India, you're probably going to do well eating rice. That's just your genetics.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how we are. What's your number 1 superfood?
Spinach.
Steak.
Avocado.
Eggs.
Yeah, I love eggs. Chicken.
Salmon.
Any green vegetable.
Carrots.
Broccoli and cauliflower.
All right, you can have those. I'll go just cauliflower. Carrots.
You're
running out already. Pumpkin seeds.
Pumpkin seeds?
Pumpkin seeds.
Okay, fair enough.
Blueberries.
Yeah, blueberries and raspberries.
Blackberries.
Yeah, all berries.
Keep going. Come on, give me some superfoods. Gluten-free oats.
Yeah, oats.
Sweet potato.
I was going to say sweet
brown
potato.
Rice.
Brown rice is...
Herring. Mackerel.
Salmon. Mackerel. Oh my God, I love mackerel.
We've already had that. Keep going. Come on, you're running out. When are you going to get to Tim Tams and Whippies? Keep going.
My mind's gone blank.
Lamb. Okay. Liver. All of these.
Oh, awful.
Liver is an unbelievable food. That's going to get some comments. I'm not eating liver. You don't have to eat liver. Okay, so you'll notice that on that list that I would give people, pretty much all meats, all vegetables, and some really low glycemic, wholesome carbohydrates like sweet potato, like brown rice, like gluten-free oats, okay? So it doesn't have to be as restrictive as that, but they would be the types of foods you'd be eating.
Why would you say gluten-free?
Because in my experience, people always struggle with gluten. I have tested thousands of people, like my naturopath taught me, so of course it's
do that thing where you...
Yeah, I'm not allowed to do that. So I remember doing it with a lady once who shot for strawberries. This lady had this terrible, she's still a member now today, she had this terrible bloating, and I could never work out what it was. And she said, I used to eat a lot of fruit salad. I said, bring the fruits in. I tested she popped for strawberries. She took strawberries out for 6 months and the blowing.
I remember you doing that for me with those capsules.
It's I shouldn't talk about that sort of stuff because that's not qualified to do it. So
disclaimer.
Let's give an example of what a good day might be. If you're working with me, your breakfast might be something like 3 eggs. If you liked it, half an
with the yolk, people stop taking the yolk out of your eggs.
Half an avocado. Berries and a pear might be something as simple as that.
Oh, pears! We didn't say pears.
Pears are cool. Yeah, lots of fibre in a pear.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm trying to keep this so it sounds easy and people can start to visualise what a good plate might look like. Now, the second and third meals would be dependent on what their commitments were. So if they were at work, it would obviously be very different if they were with children. But say I might encourage, some sort of mixed salad with quinoa or with brown rice or something like that. So, for example. Seems to me tuna salad's very popular. Yeah. So I might have a huge tuna salad and I might back that up with a small serving of quinoa or brown rice or something like that. So quinoa is one of my superfoods, my naturopath.
Again, why would you choose brown rice over white rice?
Glycemic, right?
Yeah, okay.
I mean, there's that other diet, the vertical diet, where you just jack up on white rice. My experience, people never seem to digest it as well. But
fair enough.
So, and then in that afternoon, it might be something similar. Again, I'd try and get some proteins and some fats so they can almost repeat any of that.
Yeah.
And then the main evening meal, for example, might be steak, asparagus, broccoli, carrots, sweet potato.
Nice.
And when they got hungry late at night, I would say make a bowl of berries and pumpkin seeds and eat that. Don't eat Tim Tams. So that's a kind of example, and what I don't want people to think is that sounds like a lot of preparation.
So you're not a fan of dairy then?
No, let's get that in then as well. So
because I do love a bit of dairy. I love a cup of tea, and I love getting one of my meals every day is always that Farge 0% Greek yogurt and berries.
So here's where I better cover myself. All of those foods that I've just listed might be exactly the wrong thing for the people that are watching to eat, and here's why. Because until you have the blood and the stool analysis, so blood analysis is a test called an ULCAP 500, very expensive test, which basically flags for you any food that's producing a negative reaction.
Yeah.
I do mine twice a year. The other one is a Viome test, microbiome, which is a stool analysis.
Lovely.
That again tells you there's a similar sort of thing.
Yeah.
On my last ULCAP 500, I popped for cucumber, I popped for salmon, I popped for avocado.
So have you stopped eating that now?
Yeah, so normally you'll take 6 months. One thing I should point out with food sensitivities is sometimes it will just happen that you've eaten too much of that food and your body's a bit fed up with it. If you sensitivity test a bodybuilder, chicken and eggs always flag because they eat it all the time. That's not an allergy. It's not a nut allergy where I get an anaphylactic shock and I die. It's a sensitivity. So as much as I can recommend all of those foods, it wouldn't be right of me to say this is definitive.
Yeah.
Okay. Until you have the blood work by an expert, like some of the guys I work with up at a place called Breakspear Medical Clinic in Hemel Hempstead, where they have nutritionalists and specialists, and I do all my blood work. I can't tell people empirically that these are the right things. Experience tells me that the majority of those things that I listed will be phenomenally nutrient dense, quality nutrition for those people. I just wanted to make sure I covered myself there and to say that there's nothing definitive about blood work.
I always say to my clients as well that I want them to eat as much of the like green fibre superfoods as 100%. They want. I'll give them a list because I don't want them eating as much avocado as they want because obviously it's quite high in calories.
It's going to be nice and windy on all that broccoli.
But spinach, cauliflower, broccoli, any sort of lettuce and salad, mushrooms, stuff like that. Just the amount of nutrients that's in that food far outweighs the calories. And I mean, in order for spinach to have a detrimental effect on your calorie allowance, you'd have to eat 70 bags in a day. Do you know what I mean? So, the amount of vitamins and minerals that are in that food, you should be eating it all day, every day, and bulking your meals out, especially if, like me, you're greedy and you like food. Like a bit of steak and some sweet potatoes is not going to cut it for me. So I've got to have like a whole bowl of salad with it to like bulk it out, and also because it's just too important to leave out.
Right. So before our listeners start to
doze off,
get fed up of you. So I think today we've covered how we would calculate people's kcals, suggestions for macronutrients.
Yep.
We've given a kind of disclaimer to say everyone is different, and the key is You make a best guesstimate, you journal, you adjust until you find what works. We've reviewed a few of the kind of common diets and given our personal thoughts on those, as well as maybe where they can go to find some other resources so that it's not just our opinions.
Definitely.
They can do some research, look at some science and formulate their own thoughts on those things. And we've given hopefully a list of some of the types of foods that would be recommended to them, with also the disclaimer that unless you have blood work, you don't know for definite if that food...
It's just trial and error, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably a bit more than that in that I've never really had anyone flag on steak and asparagus and these types of things.
Yeah.
It's very, very rare. But wheat, dairy, yeast, tap water, refined sugar, 99.9% of people will flag with some level of sensitivity.
Do you have one of those Brita filters then?
People should get reverse osmosis water, but that's a complete geek off.
Okay.
Reverse osmosis, they fit it to your tap. It basically is an incredible filtration and purification system.
Have
Reverse
you got one of
osmosis
those in
is,
your house?
of course I have. I want to live till I'm 150, don't I?
Fair enough.
Right, we've gassed on too long. Part 3,
Boom.
and probably part 4 and part 5.
Part a million.
Part 3, we're going to address the psychological stuff.
Yeah.
The questions that people can ask themselves to try and get leverage, get momentum, set some goals.
Boom.
Anything else?
Hydration? Is that for part 3?
What do you mean? Can I have a drink? Or?
No, like the importance of drinking.
Yeah, sweet.
For weight loss.
Sweet. All right,
Cover
cool.
that.
Did we do a good job?
We did.
See you in part 3.
Bye.